Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for the Baking in Quality, the CloudBees Cultural Transformation at Scale webinar. So up top, I just want to make sure that everyone can hear me okay. So if you can, please put your name and where you're listening from in the chat window, just so we can make sure that everyone is all set and good to go. If at any time the audio cuts out, please just put in the questions or chat that you can't hear, and I will be keeping an eye out for it. Moving on. We are recording this session, and so we will be able to send everyone a recording later if need be. You can ask questions. So at the end, we're going to have some time for Q&A. So please ask questions, even if there's a chance we may not get to them. Please do, because I can collect them after the fact and get back to you later. So at any time, if you think of something, put it right on in. We actually have my colleague Carl Schultz watching the questions today to make sure that we're keeping an eye out on everything that comes in. In the chat window, just so everyone knows, not the question window, I'm about to put text for a tweet, and there's a hashtag in this tweet. The first 5 people to send it out are going to get a free t-shirt. So I'm going to give it just a second to make sure everyone is ready to actually send that out as you hear it and no one's caught off guard. But in just a minute, in chat, I'm going to put in a thing you can just copy and paste right into Twitter. So I'm putting that in right now. There we go. All right, so we do have a lot to get through. I'd like to get started right away. As I said, we are recording. You can ask questions, please do. But to kick us off, I'd like to pass this right over to our speaker for today. She's quality engineering at CloudBees. Her name is Isabel Villacedis.
Thank you, Max. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Baking in Quality webinar. So I'm going to be talking today about how we change CloudBees culture to bake quality into our products and how we use our own products to do it. So first of all, I'm going to give a little bit of background to explain why we did all this. Then I'm going to deep dive into the Shift Left initiative, which is key to all of this. Then I'm going to talk about how our release team handles the delivery process and how CloudBees makes sure that we have safe rollouts. And at the end, I'm going to end talking about how do we know if after all this we're doing, we're getting any better. So we did this cultural transformation because of, inspired by 2 things, basically. The first one is the fact that the earlier you find a bug, the cheaper it is to fix it. In the beginning, we were mostly testing in the latest stages of the software development lifecycle. So what that was causing that we were finding last-minute issues that were blocking releases and even affecting customers. So we wanted to do testing earlier in the process, more testing in the beginning. It's also done in the spirit of release early, release often. We were releasing twice a year, which increased the risk for our customers incredibly. So now I'm going to explain to you how we managed to increase the quality of our products by shifting all the quality processes to the left and releasing more often. So as I said before, testing was done late in the software development lifecycle, and it was very focused on release acceptance testing. So testing the whole product as a whole. But now quality is part of the definition of done of our users and bug fixes, which means that a story is completed and ready to be merged when it's code complete, fully tested, and documented. And that's understood through the entire engineering organization. Before explaining how the quality engineering team works with developers here at CloudBees, I'm going to go briefly through how a traditional quality model looks like. So the traditional quality model, the quality is the quality team's responsibility. So they take the blame if something goes wrong. That's kind of typical. Testing happens at the end of the software development lifecycle, and that results in ping-pongs between developers and quality assurance engineers, which causes also long feedback loops between developers and testers. And the result is that a developer, it takes a long time for a developer to know the impact of his or her changes in the product. At CloudBees, quality is the entire team's responsibility. That means that from the PM to developers, designers, the team lead, and even, of course, the quality engineer, they're all responsible for guaranteeing the quality of the product that we all deliver together. Testing and quality requirements are defined alongside with feature requirements. So we think about quality and testing from the very beginning, from the feature definition phase. And that guarantees that, sometimes we even prevent bugs from even being written down. And the last one, an important one, is that at CloudBees we continuously give feedback to developers. From kickoff meetings to automated builds, we always try to make sure that they know the impact of their changes in our products. So how do we implement that in practice? So there are three main pillars, three main responsibilities that a quality engineer has in the company. The first one is related to the testing scope. It's about helping developers define the testing that needs to happen for a new feature or bug fix. The second one is based on the fact that we know that sometimes testing doesn't happen, or developers or quality engineers don't test because it's difficult, it's time-consuming, or is even not possible with the tooling they have. So it's our responsibility to make sure that we make testing easier and even possible for them. So it's more focused on tooling and automation. And the third pillar is based on our DNA as a company. We're customer-centric, which means that we are continuously analyzing and identifying risks and painful areas for customers. And we come up with mitigation and preventing plans to make sure that customers don't suffer from bugs, or that they have whatever they need. So now what I'm going to do is elaborate a little bit more on each of these pillars for you to see how we implement this working together with developers. One of the tools that we use to drive the first pillar, which is about test and scope, is quality bars. And no, it's not a bar that serves high quality drinks, spirits and stuff like that. No, it's really the bar that we set, the quality requirements that need to be met before going to production. It's basically based on a risk assessment. So on a change basis, we agree with the developers on the risk of the change, the impacted areas, and the testing that needs to be done. And then we set that bar that needs to be met before going to production. But testing is not only about functional cases, right? So it's not about sitting down with the developer and saying, hey, we need to test this and this and this case of the flows. It's not just that. We compose quality bars with a lot of different requirements, functional and non-functional, and they contain also everything that is related to make our customer experience easier, smoother, and lovable. As I said before, quality bars are created together with the epics of the new features, and they need to be completed before the story is considered to be ready to be merged. What are the things that we take into account more in depth, like functional and non-functional requirements? So we talk about, of course, functional test cases. We also take performance into account because for us it's very important, right? A lot of our customers, even ourselves, rely on CloudBees products to their main activities. So we need to make sure that we can handle high load, and we have very big customers. We also take care of usability. Jenkins and CloudBees products are technical products and projects, so it's very important to make them easy to use. It's also important to make them scalable over time for peaks in peak hours, just like the subway. We also care about security because our customers put a lot of information of what they're building in their builds, so security is important for us. Also integrations. Think about the Jenkins ecosystem. There are hundreds and hundreds of plugins, and we need to guarantee that they all work together. We also take into account diagnosability. If something goes wrong, we want to make sure that our customers know as soon as possible and understand what's going on to fix it themselves or to report it to us and being able to help them. And for us, another big thing is supportability. You can run CloudBees products in different platforms such as OpenStack, AWS, vSphere, and you can have agents running in Windows. Like, I mean, there's a lot of complexity in all the platforms and OSs that we support. So keeping that compatibility and that supportability is very important for us. So as you see, a quality bar is not just a list of test cases, it's much more. Also along the lines of helping developers define the testing that needs to be done, I want to clarify, quality engineers do testing, but we do not do all the testing. We are not the sole responsibles for testing. In general, developers are responsible for testing their changes, but we are true believers of exploratory testing. And we're also in a really good position because we're building a product that is thought for developers. We're development teams. So that means that we have in our development teams the different personas, the dev, the PM, the manager, quality engineer. So we can benefit from different points of view whenever we test changes. And that's how we use backbashes. So backbashes are collective testing sessions where the entire team tests something, usually big changes or new features. And that way you get the different points of view or the different personas. And in general, they're real fun, they're useful. Another characteristic of these backbashes is that they're timed. So it's not like you spend an entire day doing it. It's slot in time, you have an hour or two, there are different areas, but it's exploratory testing. It's based on exploration, not based on scripted test cases, manual test cases. Let's move to the second pillar. It's about tooling and automation. So, well, you would be wondering, if you do not do all the testing, then what the hell do you do, right? Apart from helping developers define the scope of testing. So yes, we help defining what to test, we help defining how to better test it, and we also help defining with which tools. One important thing that we do is help define the P1 cases that we call. So P1 comes from priority 1, and these are cases that if they fail, they will cause a severity 1 issue, a very high impacting issue in our customers. So we define those together with developers and guarantee that that's met before going to production, of course. And we also increase coverage for legacy features that have those P1 cases defined, but are not automated for some reason. We also contribute to the open source for that, of course. We also provide tools, frameworks, environments, and test data for developers to do their testing. So we have an example, which is providing test data to stress pipelines. We have also created a client-side performance testing framework, which helps us measure page load time, for example, for a couple of new features that we have that are UI-oriented. We also put in place monitoring for features where it's not that interesting to know if they work or not. Don't get me wrong, that's important. But it's also important to understand how they degrade over time. So monitoring plays a really important play here. And we're also experimenting with that. And in general, whenever we can, we also try to improve the gaps of acceptance testing. But quality is not only about quality, it's also about efficiency. So you can have all the testing in the world, but if they're not accessible and they're not easy to run, then developers will never do it. So to gain confidence about everything that arrives to the delivery stage, to gain confidence that it has been tested at a component level and integration level with whatever is in master at a certain point in time, we have lots of pipelines and more pipelines and more pipelines. And they help developers check their changes and test them during the development process. Before this, it was locally testing or doing runs that were triggered manually so that they could be forgotten and all this kind of stuff. We are moving towards a model where everything is automated and everything is triggered in an automatic way on checking. How does our testing pyramid look like? So I've talked a little bit about where we're moving towards, and this is more or less automation-wise the model that we have. So we, of course, have a big base of unit tests. We have integration and component tests. Just think about, you know, how CloudBees products are created and all the ecosystem plugins that we have integrated with us. So integration tests are important. We also have acceptance tests. And at the very top of what it was supposed to be a pyramid, there is monitoring and post-deployment verification. So we are moving more and more towards that, given that, you know, the market is moving toward a service-oriented development and architecture. So it becomes more and more important not only to catch things in advance, but also whenever things go wrong, to be the first one to know before your customers and react very fast. So that's why we're putting a lot of stress on monitoring and post-deployment verification. Just for those who are not familiarized with post-deployment verification, is nothing but, you know, you deploy your changes in an environment, and right after that, you run your most important golden cases. If those pass, then you go ahead with a rollout to the next environment. If they go wrong, you perform a rollback. So that's kind of the idea where we're moving towards. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the delivery process. This is not the responsibility of the quality team, it's the responsibility of the release team, but I'm going to give an overview of how we're doing in that front and a bit of evolution as well. So things evolved very quickly in CloudBees, and we needed to perform some changes in the last year. So we moved from, you know, just two products that were very related to each other, which are CGP Client Masters and CGP Operations Center, and, you know, very separated in time releases, so probably 1 or 2 a year. We moved from that to a situation where we are releasing on a monthly basis. We also have, you know, their security releases that come from ourselves in Jenkins Core. We have different lines. We have increased the portfolio, so we have more products. We have CloudBees Jenkins Team. We have CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise, and the 2 other legacy products that I mentioned before. So, you know, there's a lot going on, and that involves that we need to, you know, guarantee more compatibility and run more tests, and, you know, guarantee that all those pieces work together. And this comes with some challenges. For us, the release process is very important. It cannot afford downtimes. So as the release pace and the portfolio grows, we need to run more tests and more frequently. We need to generate more artifacts. We need to have more historical test builds. We need to have, you know, more time-consuming and repetitive tasks. So automation is our solution, of course. This all requires better scalability and better management. And it also, you know, calls for having everything automated and have push-button releases. We also need to have, you know, different pipelines that are different, but they're doing similar things at the same time. So reusing pipeline code was very important for us, and that's why we needed to use the latest pipeline features like shared libraries, for example, so that we get easily maintainable pipelines. So that's, you know, the background of where we were release-wise and where we want to be. How did we do it? We migrate to CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise. So that's one of our cloud offerings, and it's an on-demand provision. It provides on-demand provision dedicated managed masters, and it gives you something that is important for the release team, which is isolation from other teams, which have less critical activities, and that way they don't collide and put on risk releases. It also ensures the stability of the instance. It also allows you to have separated ownership of masters and, you know, the configuration, the pipelines, the credentials, and have no dependencies with other teams. So, you know, the setup is very easy. We also have on-demand agent instantiation, and it happens dynamically from Docker images. So this is not only for the release process, but for all the automated testing that is happening around the company. It's fully replicable, and we're using Docker files, so configuration as code, so easy peasy. We also had more efficient management of shared resources with CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise, because workers were partitioned smartly when allocating resources for each job. So we were wasting less resources than with external agents that we were using before. And about scalability, well, it's as simple as adding more workers. You need more capacity, you add more workers, and you don't need to really configure anything because it's all out of the box. And resource allocation happens around time. So as a summary, this new offering allows us to release more often, to test more often, and more products with less maintenance code, more confidence, and without downtimes. So we can say that we are happy customers of our own products. That's, a good thing to say. How does the release process work? So we do continuous delivery. And you might say, well, you release once a month, but the reality is that our master is always releasable. The reason why we release on a monthly basis is because of the cadence that customers upgrade. So products in our portfolio are always ready to be shipped, just pushing a button. And at the release phase, what we do is that, well, and the reason why we can do this is thanks to the quality process and the shift left that takes care of the quality changes at development time, but also thanks to the release and request for change process that makes sure that the exact set of changes that customers will get are tested when changes are integrated into the distribution. So keep in mind, again, that we are not only talking about CloudBees specific changes, but Jenkins core changes, open source plugin changes, security releases, and whatnot. So there are lots of moving pieces here. So let's say that we press the button release. The words are generated for the different products. Then the distributables are generated for the different supported distributables. Then we have the update centers. And then, we have the release notes created. All of that for all the products that we support. And after that, the release is staged. And you will wonder, well, you have all this process. You go directly to production, right? Continuous deployment. But there is one stage in between. We have a very special first customer, and it's CloudBees. It's ourselves. We do dogfooding, which means that nothing else than using our own products before our customers do. The reason why we do this is because we recognize that testing is synthetic, and that we are representative enough to our customers. And CJE is also in our critical path. So if our product is not working fine, we have a high incentive to make it better since we use it every day. So as a summary, we feel customers' pain if we do it wrong. Dogfooding works really well to catch big issues that only manifest at scale or with certain configurations. But it's also good to understand if your new features are going to get adoption. So if your teams internally don't use the features that you produce, they're not useful for them, maybe they're not for the customers. So after we leave some time the release in the dogfooding environment, it's time to press the promote button, and all that happens is that the distributables that were produced before are made public. The update centers are public, and the release notes are public, and we're all of a sudden in production. So talk about all we do, how we do it, and all the pillars we have. But how do we really know if we are getting better? How do we know if all the efforts we're doing are moving us into towards the right direction? And how do we know we're, getting happy customers? The answer is metrics. We want to understand the impact of the quality activities in our deliverables. We want to understand customers' pain to improve over time. And the end goal is really to drive our roadmaps so that we understand what are the areas that we want to harden to, mitigate most of customer pain. And not only that, also understand what are the customer requirements and give them what they need. So we're not only talking about bugs here, but also feature requests and enhancements. So what we measure are mainly 2 or 3 things, I would say. So we measure high impact bugs affecting customers per release and per component. This is effectively the issues that get escalated from the support team to the developers, which require an emergency fix. So obviously the main goal of that is to get those reduced to 0. But we also take very seriously the high impact bugs that are reporting internally during our dogfooding process. So we have the metrics to keep track of that and see the tendency of the numbers. But what happens after? We not only try to drive our roadmaps to get better, but every time that after development there's an issue found in production or in the dogfooding environment, we first get that fixed to get our customers in the safe mode again. But after that, we do further root cause analysis. And we come with a preventive plan to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future. And then we close the circle, injecting that knowledge into development whenever we help developers define the testing that needs to be done for their features. So that's how we kind of, do continuous integration and continuous improvement. So what are the results that we have obtained after this? After a year doing this, we have reduced 70% of our production issues, and all this through the power of CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise and our processes. So that's a pretty good number. And as a summary, I just want to summarize that quality is the whole team's responsibility. That's key to your success in an engineering organization. Shift to the left as much as you can, avoid last-minute surprises, and give developers the tools that they need self-serve. Do safe rollouts through extensive testing and also dogfooding whenever your products allow that. And the most important one, be customer-centric. Measure the pain that they suffer and drive your roadmaps to keep customer happy. And that's pretty much it. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Hi, Isa. We did have a number of questions come up through the question asking feature. I can go through them at this time if there are no further ones.
Awesome. That sounds good.
Yeah, I think we can dive right in.
Okay, sure. So, and I apologize for potential mispronunciations of people's names. Rajendra Prasad G has asked, what is the Jenkins version?
So do you mean what's the Jenkins version that we were using?
I assume so.
Okay, so we're out of the CloudBees offering. We're using CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise. That contains always the Jenkins table core, if that's what you're asking. So we are always in the latest CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise, the latest version in our internal CI. But the Jenkins core version that we have is the latest table.
Okay,
More questions? I hope I have answered that one. And if I haven't, don't hesitate to keep asking.
Sure, yeah, Rajendra, sorry, and again, sorry again if I'm mispronouncing your name, but please reach out if we've misunderstood the question. All right, so then moving on to the next one, is it possible to automate test cases once we generate this is from Arul Ramasamai. Is it possible to automate a test case once we generate WAR files or something else using Jenkins? And Isa, I think that probably ties into the pipelines that you spoke of earlier.
Yeah, so one thing is actually automating the cases, which could do with any automation framework. I mean, if you want to do unit tests, you can use JUnit. If you want to do more acceptance tests like tests, you can use, I don't know, WebDriver or something like that. So you can automate tests with that. Then what you can do with CloudBees Jenkins Enterprise is actually to orchestrate everything so that those tests are kicked off by PR or after the WAR is generated, and then right after you have a stage in the pipeline that says, hey, once I get the WAR generated, run these tests. Yes, of course. There's pipelines offers that is called stages. And I mean, you have an input and then you can trigger some other stages out of that. So absolutely, yeah.
Right, and again, if anyone needs further details, please don't be shy. Here's a question from Bolo Ratibi. When you talk about a more encompassing testing regime that brings together developers, etc., how important is it to include the business users, either directly or through the product owners, in developing those test bash scripts and other types of test scripts? Interesting question.
Yeah, so that's actually really, really important. I mean, we are representative to our customers, but we really, I mean, every customer makes a slightly different use of CloudBees products, right? So it's important to, A, be in touch with the product manager who is continuously in touch with customers. So we actually have a customer advisory board. We have meetings organized, like conferences organized together with customers continuously to understand if they like our release cadence, if they are suffering from quality, if they want new features, and understand how they use our products. So that's, of course, very important. Another thing that is key to our business and to our DNA is that when I say that we're customer-centric, I mean, we have a huge, very technical support team that is assisting customers 24 hours, 365 days a year. So we do understand also through the support team how our customers are using our products, and we have lots of metrics of, for example, the OSs where they're running their instances. We understand the platforms they use in the cloud to run their Jenkins. So we have enough information to make decisions about, okay, should we test this or that? Does this have more or less priority? Because we have the objective information and because we are continuously in touch with customers. Regarding the product manager, they're all our friends, right? Like we all set together priorities, and since the testing stories are part of the definition of done, we all need to agree on what gets in. So yeah, we're really good partners. I hope I answered your question.
Okay, I'll move on. I'm just going down the list because we've got a lot of additional questions after you presented your summary. How does CloudBees regression test 1,000 plus plugins in an agile fashion?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So in this presentation, we didn't talk about a key plugin of CloudBees, which is called the Beekeeper plugin. The Beekeeper plugin is the center of what we call the CloudBees Assurance Program, which is a program that is led right now by the release team. So let's think about CloudBees products as an onion, right? You have Jenkins core, you have all the ecosystem of plugins, and you have the CloudBees products on top of that, and we also have a lot of plugins. So how do we put all this together? So the CloudBees Assurance Program through the Beekeeper plugin, what it does is it really makes sure that the core open source plugins are compatible with our products. And the Beekeeper plugin does that for you. So it handles upgrades for you in a safe way. And if you are doing something that is not safe, but you still want to do it, it lets you know, and it says, hey, if you upgrade, let's say, the SCM API plugin or the GitHub run source plugin to this version, you're going to run into issues with your CloudBees instance, your Jenkins instance. So that's one way that we have. So we have a kind of a, you know, a fixed set of plugins that we know that work together. And for the rest, automation. Automation is the answer, and getting better coverage over time. And every time we find something that is big, you know, analyze it and make sure that we cover that gap of automation. So these are the two ways that we get to make the whole puzzle work together.
Thanks. Okay, let me move on to another one. I'm gonna try to paraphrase this. How do you manage the continuous integration and continuous delivery from lower environments to production environments through the Jenkins file, which can be manipulated from the source code repository? I think this question is asking, we may need some additional clarification on this question, so I'm going to move on to the next one, if that's all right by you, Isa.
Yeah, as you wish. I mean, as I understand the question is more like, okay, there are teams, right? And then there's the release process, and you have several repos contributing to the artifacts that get delivered to the customers. So yeah, there are different pipelines for specific plugins, pipelines for cores, and pipelines for plugins plus products. So there are different stages that the different stages that I explained in the release process. So that's what puts everything together and tests everything together. And all around, what you have is different teams that own different plugins, contributing and testing at a component and integration level. And then in the release process, what you do is that you put everything together and you do a last run of tests to make sure that, you know, everything works together as customers are going to get it. And the pipelines are very similar. What changes is actually the setup. I mean, the plugins that you are testing against at any time. So usually, if you're a developer, you know, developing against master, then you will test against master of your plugin and whatever is master of the repository with all the plugins together. But that changes over time, right? So if I do this today, the baseline changes tomorrow. So that's why we have in the release phase another pass of tests. But the pipelines are kind of similar, yes.
Okay, thanks. What is the role of Docker in this process? I guess.
Yeah, well, we have configuration as code, so it's everything for us. We have the agents that we create are based in shared templates. They're usually, you know, Docker templates. So it's very, very important. It's vital for us. Yes. And our distributables are actually delivered also in the form of Docker images. So it's all around the company. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Anudeep asks, what tools are used to get acceptance test coverage and quality metrics?
So for acceptance tests, we try to be good open source citizens. So we are extending for CloudBees products the acceptance test harness that Jenkins provides, which is based in Selenium, and that's what we use. It's kind of a framework on top of Selenium, and that's what we use. And for metrics, it really depends on which metrics you're talking about. So if you can get clarification on those metrics, that would be great. I mean, if you're talking about number of bugs, then I mean, we use Jira to keep track of our issues, so that would be Jira. If you're talking about, I don't know, page load time, maybe, you know, I don't know, that's another tool that we use, JMeter. If you're talking about, you know, monitoring an instance, then, I mean, the tool could be CloudWatch. So if you can get more concrete questions on that, that would be great.
Sorry, my list of questions glitched there for a moment. I'm back. Nowadays, more apps are built on top of serverless cloud services like AWS Lambda. How do you envision Jenkins support for CI/CD scenarios for these cases, where sometimes testing is only possible when the app is deployed?
So we actually have a couple of products that have that architecture, and I'm not talking about Lambdas, I'm more talking about distributed system architecture, so service-oriented architecture. So we have the DevOptics plugin that we released actually in Jenkins World in August. That was one of the big ones, and that's service-based. And you're totally right, and that's what I said when I showed that what was supposed to be a testing pyramid is actually an hourglass, because when you have that kind of architecture, testing becomes a little bit less useful, and monitoring and post-deployment verification becomes more useful. So let's say, I can explain the example I explained before, where we have this service that we get deployed to staging, and right after the deployment, there's a hook that runs some acceptance tests. If those pass, then the application gets deployed into production, but if they fail, then they don't. So that's kind of how we do it. And monitoring is also an important thing, like we're monitoring continuously our services. We're monitoring if they're up, so, you know, kind of a health check, classic approach. And then we also monitor response time. We also monitor the kind of responses, like, you know, 404, 200s and stuff like that. So yes, the answer is through post-deployment verification, staged deployments, and monitoring.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. More questions?
Sure, yeah, there are a lot of them, and I'm happy to keep going through them. On promoting builds, are you using a quality threshold to set the limits on the delivery? Is there any release manager that monitors the quality gates before promoting the releases to production sites?
So I mean, if you're at the developer steps, so to say, I mean, you have the runs that are kicked off, you do a pull request, you make a change, you do a pull request, you get a code review. That's the first gate, right? Well, no, actually the first gate is we define the quality requirements. So we say, hey, developers, this is what we think we need to be testing here. Then the code review happens, and we check that everything is fine, that, you know, what we agreed is there, and so on and so forth. Then the test, of course, as part of the PR, the tests are run. And I mean, if they're red, you merge. That's basically it. Once all the tests are green, sorry, and the code review is successful, then you merge. At the release stage, so then that gets merged, and you need to do a change request to the distributable, so to say, repo. And then there's again another test run. And if the tests are not green, then that doesn't, you know, get merged. So there is a release team, but it's a very small team, and almost everything is automated. So I mean, ultimately, there's somebody looking at the builds, but it's more like, hey, this is not going to get in. So you do a change request, the build gets red, but usually people keep working until the build is green. But yeah, there is a release team, yes. But there's nobody saying, so there's no like go, no go meeting, so to say, for the whole release, if that's where your question was coming from. There's a process, we follow it. If we find any anomalies, then, you know, we get some of the people involved in the process together, and we make a decision to fix problems, or, you know, just push out what's causing the problem and move forward. So, but that usually only happens when we find big issues. But in general, it's developers interacting with the release team on a change request basis through the tests. Yes.
What tools are we using for performance profiling and load testing?
Okay, so we started recently doing performance testing. So for client-side performance testing, we're using JMeter and a couple of Windows machines in AWS to generate the load. With that, what we did, well, we also released that product in Jenkins World. It's called the Teams. We were going from the old Jenkins UI to a React-based UI, which one of the first risks we raised was, hey, this could affect client-side performance. And what we used was stage profile built with JMeter, that was taken into account not only the number of requests, but also the number of users at the same time. And I believe we were collecting the metrics with InfluxDB, but I'm not 100% sure from the top of my head.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Does a developer need to write a Jenkins file for each branch? Isn't that costly? How do we optimize this?
Oh, no. So different teams have different workflows, but in general, I mean, if you have a plugin, you have a Jenkins file, you write there what you want Jenkins to do for you, and that's it. And then whenever you develop something, and I mean, you have your hooks and the process is followed automatically. So it's not like for every pull request you need to write a Jenkins file. You write a Jenkins file, which the configuration of a specific build, but that is going to be run on a trigger. If the trigger is manual, then you will pass a parameter, trigger it manually, but the Jenkins file doesn't necessarily need to change at that time. If it's, I don't know, a pipeline project, then you will have stages that will trigger all the stages. And I mean, it really depends on the pipeline that you have, but you don't need a Jenkins file per change. That's not the idea. And I recommend you to go to the Declarative Pipeline session that Andrew Bayer is hosting. I don't really know when. I think Max can tell us later, to try to understand a little bit more how that's managed.
Agreed. And if there are any folks listening who are interested in making their pipeline development simpler, I too would recommend sitting in on that talk, because it's sure to be really good for just such issues.
More questions?
Let me go through the. I've lost my place a little bit. Sorry. The scroll bar jumps around a bit. We talked. Any suggestion for code coverage tools in case of Java or JavaScript to get QA to automation test coverage?
So we are currently using Jacoco. I think that's what we are using right now. There are several tools. I don't know, Covera is also another one. And then if you want to get not only code coverage metrics, but a lot of gamification of that, you could get Code Climate. I've used that in the past. And it tells you not only the coverage that you have, but whenever you decrease the coverage, you could configure it to post a message in the chat that you're using saying, hey, you have decreased this, you should merge this, and it gives you a reprimand. And whenever you increase it, it gives you like, hey, you're doing well and all that. So it really depends on the maturity of your team. That could be also useful. But right now we're using Jacoco, plays well with, easy to integrate with Maven, and yeah, that's what we use.
Can you demo an instance and show us in this webinar? I assume that question is related to a demo of CJE and the Dockerized workers and such.
I don't think, because I would need to connect to the VPN, and the instance that I have at hand is internal. But what you could do is leave your details so that we can refer you to the trials, because we have a trials program, so you could actually access it, create one super quickly and for free, and check it out if you're interested. So I think that's better, because I cannot show you our internal private instance, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
But that's a
So
good suggestion. That way, someone can sort of knock it around and kick the tires, so to speak, on their own.
exactly. So if you can, leave your details in the channel, then we can pass that to somebody in marketing, or even we could, send you an email to whatever you can find the trials or the information or see a demo or whatever. But that's a good idea for the next time I prepare this session. Maybe I can add a demo to it. Thanks for the suggestion.
How is the adoption level of Blue Ocean / Jenkins DSL? I presume, this is me editorializing, I assume that question implies declarative pipeline, since it's being asked in the context of Blue Ocean. Any drawbacks or upcoming feature to be integrated with this?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
The question is about the adoption level, I guess the take rate, so to speak, of Blue Ocean and the Jenkins DSL, which I'm sort of interpreting on my own, Isa, as asking about the adoption rate of declarative pipeline. And
I don't have numbers, honestly. Maybe you have, Carl. So you're talking here to the quality engineer of the team that plays around with pipelines. So maybe, Carl, you can tell them the numbers. I don't have them, honestly. But there's, again, a webinar where one of the creators is going to talk about it. So maybe you could ask him there, but I don't have the numbers.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to pin down because these days, the way those plugins are packaged, you sort of get declarative pipeline along with the rest of the pipeline family of plugins. So it's unfortunately, it's not a simple question to answer as far as what the adoption and take rates are. I believe that the last I heard, Blue Ocean about as far as instances that we have metrics on, which of course isn't nearly all of them, because there are always instances that are behind firewalls and that kind of thing. Blue Ocean is installed on over 10% of all Jenkins instances, and I should point out, the 100% of Jenkins instances include really old versions of Jenkins, such as 1.x, which wouldn't even support Blue Ocean anyway. So I think the adoption is actually taking off pretty quickly and is gaining momentum as more and more functionality is added to it. Okay, I'm gonna try to find one or two more questions. I keep using two fingers to scroll, and that moves the opposite way that I'm used to. Okay, here's a good process-oriented question. How often do you have meetings that bring together different teams? I'm curious about your organizational structure and how autonomous each group is in setting up goals and processes, including go, no-go type of decisions. Interesting.
Okay, that's a very interesting and big question. So I'm going to start talking about the structure of our teams. Then I'm going to go through how we integrate and interact together, and then how we set up goals. So the first one, we have teams that follow what it's called, I think, agile methodologies. Like, we have Kanban boards, and I mean, customers are the first thing for us. So whenever something happens, we just drop everything we are doing and try to help them. In general, every team has an engineering manager, product manager, quality engineer, and a set of developers. There's also the designers that are shared resources. And we're moving towards having more and more one operations guy embedded in the team. So what we do really, the quality engineering team, what we do is assist developers in different ways. So we're not doing all the testing. So the operations team is moving towards the same model after seeing that it worked for us. So that's kind of the composition of a team. As you can imagine, all our teams are dependent and integrate together. And we also integrate with the open source. Keep in mind that CloudBees is a distributed company, and before joining this company, I thought that I understood what distributed mean. But I mean, we have developers all around the world. my team, the quality engineering team. I'm in the south of Spain together with another quality engineer. There are 3 other quality engineers in Raleigh, and teams are all around the world, from Australia to San Jose, going through Spain, France, Switzerland, like every possible place you can imagine. How do we interact within the team? We have daily meetings. We have one daily meeting for the quality engineering team. We have every team is doing something different, but we have common challenges. So we want to make sure that we share and help each other and feel, as a team, although we are horizontal. Then there's a product team, sort of to say, daily. So all the team members go to that one. So the quality engineer of that team, the developers, the PM, the engineer manager, and the designer. And they meet once a day. They're planning meetings and whatnot. So something similar to what so-called agile team would follow. Then we have engineering weekly huddles, where we explain what each team is doing, or we demo things that we're proud of and whatnot, so that we guarantee that we're in sync. After that, we also have meetings on demand. If there are a couple of teams that are coupled somehow because they have common dependencies or they are working in a common project, then the setup meetings on demand. But these are kind of the fixed meetings that we have. We use a lot HipChat, we use a lot Hangouts, and since we kind of just, poke people around because we are all distributed, we use video calls very often. So, if I have a problem, I don't know how to get out of it, or I'm stuck with something, or I have a question, I ask in HipChat, and then, usually within 2 minutes, somebody answers and you get into a call with somebody. Regarding goals, we're starting to follow, goals at a company level, and then what we do is that we, distribute those goals along the entire organization, and then engineering has its goals, and then those cascade down to different teams. But we are all aligned because we all look towards those company goals. So that's how we set up goals. I'm not sure if I answer all your questions because there were like 4 or 5 at the same time, but I hope I did.
Okay, Max, we are at 1 minute out.
Yes, I think for today that is all we have time for, but I am collecting all of these questions because there are a lot of really great questions. And we will be able to reach out after the fact. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us. This was recorded. We will be sending out emails after the session concludes later in this week. If you are interested in any other sessions in this webinar series, you can use the same email link you used today, plus you'll be getting reminders an hour before each one. So no worries about missing out on anything there. And overall, thanks again for just a really great interactive session, and we'll be talking to you all soon. I hope to see you on many more of these.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.